First thing I saw Foolio laid up, I thought it was a car until I looked up, saw the bullet holes, and I saw Zay covered in blood yelling.
Tears welled across the courtroom as Theo's cousin took the witness stand, his hands trembling while he struggled to put those final, haunting moments into words. His voice cracked when he revealed what Foolio said just before collapsing, words that seemed to freeze everyone in place. But it was his next revelation that left even the judge unable to speak. The heartbreak in the room was almost unbearable. On October 22, 2025, the air inside the Hillsborough County Courthouse in Tampa grew heavy, thick with grief and disbelief. The silence was so intense you could practically hear every breath being held. This wasn't just another proceeding on the docket. It was a moment that would carve itself into memory. A day when raw, human emotion collided head-on with the cold, unflinching truth of a murder case that had captured the country's attention and reignited national debates about gang violence, the dangers within drill rap culture, and the long-running street feud that had torn through Jacksonville, Florida, for over 10 years. The man on the stand was Norris, cousin to the late rapper Julio Foolio, whose birth name was Charles Andrew Jones too. Norris wasn't a distant witness pulled from the periphery. He was a survivor. He had lived through it. He had been inside that black Dodge Charger on June 23, 2024, when masked gunmen stepped out from the darkness of a Tampa hotel parking lot and unleashed what prosecutors later called a blistering storm of bullets. He saw it all, his cousin, his family, his friend, trapped in chaos that felt unreal. And now, more than a year later, he sat in that courtroom forced to relive every second of that nightmare before a jury, under the glaring lights, with cameras pointed at his every movement. As Norris began to speak, his voice trembled beneath the weight of memories he had likely tried to bury deep inside. From the very first sentence, it was obvious this testimony wouldn't be mechanical or detached. It was going to be real. It was going to be painful. It was going to hurt. He recounted how they had been inside the Charger after a night of celebration, Foolio's 26th birthday, a night that was supposed to mark a milestone in his life but instead became the night that ended it.
So you fell asleep after that, after he came back to the car, or you started dozing?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember being woken up at some point, or woke up?
Yes. When the car hit, I don't remember exactly what it hit, but the car hit something that woke me up.
The confusion in those first few seconds must have been indescribable. Imagine being jerked from half sleep, your thoughts still foggy, only to sense instantly that something is horribly wrong. Norris testified that at first, he assumed they had been in a car accident. That was the only thing that made sense in those fleeting milliseconds. A crash, an impact, something explainable. But then, reality tore through the illusion with brutal clarity. As his eyes focused and his mind began to catch up, he saw something that shattered any hope this was just an accident. There were holes, dozens of them, ripped into the metal. When he lifted his head, expecting perhaps to see the aftermath of a collision, he was met instead with devastation. Bullet holes everywhere, proof of a relentless, concentrated assault that had transformed their car into something unrecognizable. The full truth struck him like lightning. This wasn't a wreck. It was an ambush. A calculated execution. A meticulously planned attack waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And amid that carnage, Norris spotted Xavier Zake Edwards, the driver, drenched in blood and screaming in shock. Another survivor of a night that felt more like a war zone than a birthday celebration.
Xavier Edwards?
Yes.
You saw him covered in blood?
Yes.
All right, so let me talk to you about Xavier Edwards. I don't know if we talked about him yet. So Xavier Edwards was also there at the clubs with you all?
Yes.
And he was driving the Dodge Charger coming from the clubs to the hotel?
Yes.
The blood that drenched him and the chaos surrounding the scene captured pure, unfiltered terror. Edwards, despite being shot in the arm and shoulder, remained conscious, struggling to comprehend what had just unfolded, clinging desperately to life.
Is he saying anything at that point?
Yes, he was yelling.
What was he yelling? And you can say exactly what he said.
Yes, he was like yelling like, shit.
As the prosecutor pressed on, asking Norris to recount his own wounds, the full, harrowing scope of what unfolded inside that car began to surface. Each question peeled back another layer of horror, exposing just how close he had come to death and how random, merciless, and senseless the violence truly was. Norris described something that would later become a key detail in piecing together the sheer brutality of that night. The randomness of bullets, how they sliced through steel and flesh alike, with no thought, no hesitation, no mercy, was chilling. It was a stark reminder of how uncontrollable and chaotic moments like this can be. Norris explained that he had been lying on his side, half asleep, defenseless and unaware when the attack began. In that vulnerable position, a bullet found him, tearing through the flesh near his shoulder, ripping through his arm. When the prosecutor asked if he still carried a scar from that wound, his quiet, subdued yes carried more weight than any elaborate statement ever could. That scar wasn't just a mark on his skin, it was a permanent symbol of survival and pain, a constant visual echo of that night. Every time he sees it in the mirror, every time he takes off his shirt, every time someone asks about it, it drags him back to that car, the parking lot, that instant of sheer, unfiltered terror. Then came another moment that shattered the composure he had fought to maintain. The prosecutor held up a set of photographs and asked softly, "Are these images of you in the hospital?" That question, simple in form but heavy in meaning, cracked something deep within him. Forced to confront those images of himself broken, bleeding, and unrecognizable, Norris lost control. The emotions he had been holding back finally surged forward. His voice gave way to sobs as tears rolled down his face. The dam that had held back the flood of grief and trauma for so long finally broke open. In front of everyone, the jury, the press, the judge, Van Deer Norris couldn't contain it any longer. The judge, clearly moved by the emotional collapse unfolding before him, gently called for a recess. He ordered the jury to step out, giving Norris a chance to breathe, to recover, to pull himself together. In those few quiet moments that followed, with tissues in hand and trembling shoulders, Norris sat trying to steady his breathing, to rebuild the fragile emotional wall that had just come crashing down. Right there, before the court and the cameras, Van Deer Norris became the embodiment of what gang violence truly costs. He wasn't just another name on a witness list. He was a young man who had seen his cousin's final breath, who had narrowly escaped death himself, and who now carried both visible scars and invisible ones that would never fade. What Norris described on that stand wasn't just a single event. It was the explosive climax of years of bloodshed, retaliation, and pain, a cycle of violence fueled by rival crews and amplified through the echo chambers of drill rap and social media. To grasp the magnitude of what unfolded that night, and why Norris's testimony left such a lasting impact, we have to go back to the roots of it all, to the tangled history that shaped Julio Foolio's life and ultimately sealed his fate. Let's rewind the clock to 2023, because what happened on June 23rd, 2024 wasn't random. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act of rage. It was the result of careful planning, a calculated, methodical setup that prosecutors later described as an ambush executed with chilling precision. The surveillance footage presented in court brought those final hours to life, each frame capturing the movements, the waiting, the approach, painting an image of Foolio's last moments with haunting, unforgettable clarity. There he was, Julio Foolio, arriving at the Home 2 Suite Hotel in Tampa at around 4:30 in the morning. He wore a red stocking cap, adjusted his shorts, and walked through the hotel doors, asking about a room. Hours earlier, he'd been celebrating his 26th birthday, performing, partying, living the life he had fought so hard to build. He tried to check into his reserved room, only to be told that because of how late they arrived, his booking had already been given away. So, he stood there, still smiling, still figuring out what to do next, completely unaware that his every movement was being monitored, unaware that someone, somewhere, was tracking his location in real time, unaware that the countdown to his final moments had already begun. The surveillance footage fast-forwarded slightly, showing time slipping by, until something new and sinister entered the frame. A vehicle rolled into view. The prosecutor's calm, measured narration sent chills through the courtroom. That car right there, that's not a random passerby. That's the assault team. These weren't bystanders or people who just happened to be nearby. These were the men who had driven all the way from Jacksonville with one single mission, to end Julio Foolio's life. Their tactical precision was unmistakable. They maneuvered north around the hotel, deliberately avoiding the direct route where Foolio and his crew were parked, moving with a kind of discipline that came from planning, not impulse. This was no crime of passion, no spur-of-the-moment rage. This was cold, deliberate calculation. As the footage played on, another vehicle appeared, a silver Nissan Altima belonging to Foolio's entourage. The driver, Taffer McCrae, and his girlfriend, Aliyah Albertun, stepped out of the car to go inside the hotel lobby and use the restroom. Ordinary people doing ordinary things, completely unaware of how close death was hovering. What none of them realized was that the moment Taffer left the driver's seat, another friend, Kamaya Bentley, slid behind the wheel. That decision, as small as it seemed, would save her life, though not without cost. She would later testify to taking a bullet through her arm as the shots tore through the car. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable as the prosecutor narrated the next moments. "We are now seconds away from the assault on the Charger." That was it, just seconds separating life from death. Seconds Fio didn't even know he had left. The footage cut to the Chevy Cruise, part of the attacker's convoy, pulling into position. Then, chaos. In the lower corner of the screen, a shooter appeared, clutching an automatic Glock. The gunfire erupted. You could see the Dodge Charger jolt as Xavier Edwards, the driver, fought to steer them out of the kill zone, desperate to protect everyone inside, desperate to survive. His every movement was instinctive, frantic, a man trying to outrun an ambush that had been waiting for them all along. One of the most devastating pieces of evidence didn't come from police or witnesses, but from technology. A Tesla parked nearby at a charging station had its Sentry mode activated, silently recording everything from multiple angles. What those cameras captured changed the entire case. The Tesla footage revealed the third shooter sprinting behind a line of parked cars, taking cover near a yellow vehicle, then positioning himself with military-like precision. In crystal clear high definition, the video exposed the entire setup, how the attackers coordinated their movements, created overlapping fields of fire, and trapped the Charger in a deadly crossfire. Later footage from the Tampa police impound lot drove the horror home even further. The Dodge Charger was riddled with yellow evidence markers, each sticker showing where a bullet had hit: the hood, the doors, the windows, the roof. Every inch told the same story. This wasn't a few reckless shots fired in panic. It was a barrage, a meticulously executed assault meant to kill every person inside that car. When the prosecutor summarized the footage, his tone was clinical yet chilling. The gunman acted with speed, precision, and overwhelming force, he said. Not one shooter, not two, but three, armed with high-powered AR-style rifles and a fully automatic Glock 19. He described it not as fire superiority, but fire supremacy, a phrase that captured the one-sided nature of the slaughter. Julio Foolio and his friends never stood a chance. Naturally, the next question became, how did law enforcement actually track down and arrest the people responsible for this? The answer reveals a truth about modern crime. In today's world, it's nearly impossible to commit a crime of this scale and escape unnoticed. DJ Academics, while discussing the case, summed it up perfectly. You got Teslas out here acting like sentries. 360-degree cameras, 4K quality, clearest footage ever. He wasn't exaggerating. That Tesla video became one of the most decisive pieces of evidence, recording the attacker's every move in crystal-clear 4K resolution. But the Tesla footage was just the beginning. Investigators combined multiple layers of technology to piece everything together. Ring cameras from the suspects' own homes captured them leaving and returning. Cell tower pings traced their movements in real time. Even though one of the suspects thought he was being clever by leaving his phone at home, detectives subpoenaed the phone records of his associates. Those records painted a damning picture, showing their devices traveling from Jacksonville to Tampa, pinging repeatedly near the hotel where Foolio was killed. Another major break came when one of the alleged accomplices, 21-year-old Alicia Andrews, began cooperating with police early on. She claimed she was simply along for a ride with her boyfriend and had no knowledge of the plan. Meanwhile, automatic license plate readers tracked the convoy vehicles along the route to and from Tampa. One car, registered to a suspect's mother, was identified on multiple cameras, and when questioned, she confirmed her son had taken that vehicle on the night of the murder. But perhaps the most damning evidence of all came not from technology, but from ballistics. Forensic experts matched shell casings and unique barrel striations to a weapon used in another shooting, linking it directly to 18-year-old Sean Shaw Gathite. It was a chilling revelation. This teenager, who only 5 years earlier had been a 12-year-old kid streaming video games online, had now evolved into what investigators described as a cold-blooded killer. The evidence piled up relentlessly. Detectives had surveillance from both inside and outside the hotel. They had Cash App records showing who paid for what during the trip. They knew which suspect's car had mechanical issues, who covered the fuel costs, and who financed the stay. Every digital trace, every transaction, every piece of metadata, it all fit together like the pieces of a meticulously assembled puzzle. What emerged was an airtight case against 5 individuals, each assigned a role within a broader conspiracy. The spotters, 21-year-old Alicia Andrews and 21-year-old Isaiah Chance Jr., had allegedly tracked Foolio's location and relayed information to the hit team. The gunman, 18-year-old Sean Gathite, 30-year-old Rashad Murphy, and 27-year-old Dave Murphy, were the ones who opened fire, unleashing the barrage that ended Foolio's life. The trial has unfolded under extraordinary security measures, with the prosecution requesting that certain witnesses and victims have their identities concealed from public broadcast due to ongoing safety risks. That fear of retaliation lingers like a shadow over the courtroom, a grim reminder that while justice unfolds inside those walls, the cycle of gang violence in Jacksonville continues unabated outside them. To fully grasp how the events of June 23, 2024, came to pass, one must look beyond the hotel parking lot and into the decade-long war that made Foolio's death seem almost inevitable. The feud between Julio Foolio's KTA 6-block crew and their rivals, the ATK 1200 gang, stretches back to the mid-2010s, a bloody conflict that has claimed dozens of lives and shattered countless families. What began as minor disputes and street-level beefs escalated into a brutal, city-wide conflict that spilled onto social media, into lyrics, and across YouTube. Drill rap tracks became both battleground and obituary, songs turning slain friends and rivals into symbols, fueling the fire even further. When rapper Boosie Badazz was asked about Foolio's death, his response reflected the chilling normalization of that world. "I ain't think nothing. I just think, you're Foolio. I mean, that's how it go, man. When you at war, that's just how it go." His words carried no malice, just weary acceptance. In that culture, death isn't a surprise. It's an expectation. Boosie's reaction cut straight to the heart of gang warfare's logic. Protect your leader, because the other side will always go after the big dog. Take out the top, and you cripple the structure beneath. They cut the head off the roost. Theo was the big dog for his side, the most visible, the most successful, the face of his entire movement. Taking him out wasn't just about revenge. It was a calculated strike meant to demoralize, destabilize, and send a message. What made his death even more tragic was how avoidable it seemed. Despite surviving previous attempts on his life, including being shot in the foot, Foolio remained shockingly open about his whereabouts. Instead of lying low, he went public. He announced his birthday party on Instagram, told followers to DM him for the address, and broadcasted his every move. When you do that, you never really know who's watching. You don't know whether a DM is from a fan who wants to celebrate with you, or from someone who wants you dead. After his murder, the disrespect didn't stop. It escalated. Young Ace, one of Theo's main rivals, dropped a diss track just hours after the shooting, and then another a few days later. But the most disturbing twist came from Foolio's own Instagram account. Posts continued appearing after his death, taunting rivals and replying to comments as if he was still alive. Whoever had access to that account used it to keep the feud burning, turning Foolio's death into a digital afterlife of provocation. It was surreal, dystopian, and it proved how deeply the culture of violence had become intertwined with the online world. The role of music in this war couldn't be overstated. Drill rap, a subgenre of hip-hop born in Chicago, became both the soundtrack and the battlefield of the Jacksonville gang war. 4 artists on both sides, the music wasn't just self-expression. It was a weapon. Tracks became threats. Lyrics became obituaries. Every bar, every diss, every music video poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The most infamous example was Young Ace's Who I Smoke. The song, which sampled Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles, mocked dead members of Foolio's crew, and it exploded online, racking up tens of millions of views. It made national headlines and turned the Jacksonville feud into viral entertainment. But to those in the streets, it wasn't entertainment. It was war. Foolio responded with When I See You, a track filmed at his rivals' gravesites, a direct, haunting retaliation. The back and forth continued for years, each song daring the other side to respond not just with words, but with bullets. Each track became a potential trigger for the next act of violence. Looking back, it's hard to separate Foolio's music from his reality. Violence followed him like a shadow, always close, always waiting. That shadow had been there since his teens. At just 15 years old, Foolio was shot, and somehow survived. He spent months learning to walk again. You'd think that kind of trauma might change someone, steer them away from the streets. But when he tried to go back to school, he was turned away. No explanation. No second chance. Feeling rejected by the system, with no safety net and nowhere else to go, he made a fateful choice to embrace the streets fully. And I left, he recalled later. From that moment, his life took a different path. What followed was a cycle of arrests, short detentions, and quick releases. Guns became a constant presence, both in his lyrics and in his life. By 17, he caught his first serious charge, and the story of that arrest perfectly captured his teenage recklessness. On Christmas Day, he and a group of friends drove through a movie theater parking lot in Orange Park, flashing guns out the window at random people. Police noticed immediately. After a brief chase, 10, maybe 15 seconds, they were caught. 4 guns in the car. Foolio, being the only juvenile, spent just a month in detention before walking free again. He admitted later that if he'd caught one more gun charge, he'd have been sent away for years. But fate gave him a pass, and he took it as a sign to keep going, not realizing that every pass only brought him closer to his final one. But that next charge never came. Not then, anyway. And so, Foolio stayed on the streets. What's undeniable is that the combination of social media, streaming platforms, and drill rap has completely transformed the landscape of gang conflict. What once stayed confined to specific blocks or neighborhoods now unfolds on a global stage, broadcast to millions of screens. Every diss, every threat, every tragedy becomes content, amplified by views, likes, and comments that turn violence into viral spectacle. The pressure to respond, to prove strength, to avenge friends, to avoid looking weak, grows unbearable when the entire world is watching. In Jacksonville, law enforcement has been trying to break this cycle. Sheriff T.K. Waters has emphasized a proactive approach, targeting known gang members and intervening before violence erupts. The arrests in Foolio's case proved just how sophisticated modern investigations have become, drawing on surveillance footage, cell tower pings, license plate readers, social media activity, and ballistics evidence to connect each fragment of data became a thread, and together they wove a case so strong it was almost impossible to deny. The courtroom proceedings will continue. More witnesses will take the stand, more evidence will surface, and eventually, a jury will decide. Guilty or not, justice or tragedy. But in the end, that's only part of the cost. The true toll of this violence isn't measured only in the dead, but in the living, the ones who have to carry the weight of what they saw, what they survived, and what they'll never be able to forget. As the trial moves forward and new details come to light, it's important to remember, this isn't just a story about rappers, gangs, or viral diss tracks. It's a story about people, flawed, complex, and deeply human. People shaped by their environment, by circumstance, by choices both small and monumental. On that June night in Tampa, their paths collided, and the result was devastation. When Vandia Norris broke down on the witness stand, those tears came from a place no one should ever have to revisit. He wasn't just testifying, he was reliving the worst night of his life. Staring at photos of himself bloodied in a hospital bed. Remembering the screams, the gunfire, his cousin's final moments. His cousin, who should still be here, who should have had the chance to turn 27, 30, 40, and beyond. Those tears weren't only for Foolio. They were for all the lives lost to this endless cycle, for the families still grieving, for the young men still trapped in a system that offers few ways out. Because behind the headlines, behind the music videos and the courtroom drama, are real people living with real pain. Until society learns to break that cycle, to offer better paths, better opportunities, and real change instead of just punishment, there will always be more Vandia Norrises sitting on witness stands, reliving nightmares in front of strangers. What are your thoughts on Foolio's cousin's emotional testimony? Share them in the comments, and click the cards on your screen for more untold stories behind the headlines.